My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. I've always been amused when I see those books entitled Learn Chinese Without Effort or Algebra for Dummies. I just find it interesting that anyone can think that they can learn Chinese without effort. Of course, the people writing these books and the people that buy these books hopefully understand that it is practically impossible to learn Chinese without putting a lot of time and effort into it, or learning algebra without putting a lot of effort and time to go through the exercises and practice. But what these books try to do, sometimes in a very effective way, is to make something hard, something that seems inaccessible, like learning Chinese or learning algebra for some of us. They make it achievable, they make it accessible, and they come up with a system that allows pretty much anybody to go through the motions and eventually learn something very complicated that would maybe otherwise be quite impossible unless you were like really smart or went to a really good school or something like that. So they allow any single person out there to learn and have access to these difficult topics. I guess if we could have a book called like that regarding sanctity, a book that we could maybe entitle Become a Saint Without Effort, we could come up with something similar. Of course, we know that being a saint is a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of grace from God more than anything else. But the desire and sacrifices on our part. But if I would have to write a book like that, I would probably put St. Joseph's example very much at the center of that book. Because, in a way, St. Joseph shows us how to be a saint without being too complicated. St. Joseph is not immaculate like Mary was. St. Joseph was not some kind of superhero. He doesn't do anything really that special. I mean, yes, he was the foster father to Jesus. That's kind of special. But even then, I mean, he wasn't the natural father of Jesus. He just happened to be there. He doesn't say much in the Gospels, pretty much. Actually, he doesn't say anything. But he obeys. He listens to God's will. And he can be a very accessible example for you and me. If we are dummies in this sense, and we want to be saints without being superheroes, which most of us here, I guess, are not, then let's look at St. Joseph. And today, March 20th, we're celebrating his feast day, even though it's usually March 19th, but it's Sunday of Lent. So we've had to move the feast to today. We're celebrating the solemnity of this great man, this great saint, spouse of the Blessed Virgin Mary, foster father to Jesus Christ. A hardworking man, holy man, an obedient man who tried his best to do God's will. We see it in the gospel today. He was already betrothed with Mary when he finds out that she's expecting a child. Of course, St. Joseph, not knowing what to do or what his role was in this whole thing, he understood maybe there was something supernatural behind this. And so he decides not to expose her to shame and to quietly divorce her and move out, probably leaving his hometown, leaving his work, being himself full of shame, I guess, because people would have blamed him for abandoning Mary, expecting a child. But he's just trying to do the best thing in a very complicated situation. He's trying to figure out what God's will is for him, and it feels like, to the best of his understanding, that he needs to just walk away. But then he has this dream where the angel of the Lord appears to him and says, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife, into your home." And the angel explains to him how this baby has come to be conceived and how he is to name him Jesus. And then the gospel says, when Joseph awoke, he did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took his wife into his home. He simply obeyed. He understood God's will and he went for it. Later on, he would go to Bethlehem, understanding that it was God's will because the Caesar had come up with this census and they really didn't have any other choice but to go to Bethlehem and then find a place where Jesus can come into the world. And then they take Jesus to the temple and then they name him Jesus, following the angel's command. And then they're off to Egypt, another dream, and then back to Nazareth. And then we can imagine the rest of his life that we don't know much about. Must have been a very simple life, just doing God's will, which was living with Jesus, helping Mary, working in the shop, sanctifying his work as best as he could, teaching Jesus how to work, how to do things well, taking him to school, going out to play with him, spending time with his family, neighbors. Again, nothing really special, nothing really spectacular. Actually, if you think about it, Joseph apparently never even saw Jesus perform a miracle. Because we understand he was dead by the time that Jesus was old enough, and when he does his first miracle in the wedding in Cana, it looks like Joseph is already dead by then. So he never even got to see his son Jesus perform a miracle. But none of that was necessary. Nothing spectacular, nothing really special, nothing very supernatural. Of course, having Jesus in his house was extremely supernatural and spectacular, but in an ordinary way. And maybe you and I are called to live sanctity in a very ordinary way, something very supernatural, something very spectacular, but not doing anything really special. Jesus, help us understand. Help us learn from your father Joseph, so that we can also find our sanctity there, understanding that we, being dummies a little bit, not wanting to put too much effort, not being any superheroes or special saints, we can also be saints. And we have the example of Joseph. Let us ask him as well for his intercession. so that from heaven He can inspire us and guide us in this ordinary life that we're also trying to sanctify. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.